Hello and welcome back to the Politics Unbox podcast. My name is Reese and this is episode number 35 of the 2020 Visions section of the podcast, which is where I talk about the US presidential election that is going on November the 3rd this year, and of course all the other elections going on that date, but this will be mainly focused on the presidential election. Today it is time to have a look at something the president has said, which is something so often that we have to look at. And it is that Donald Trump has today said that the election of November the 3rd should be delayed because, and I quote, it will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent in history. He also says that the autumn election would be a great embarrassment to the country. Now, this is interesting because Donald Trump had previously said no, he would not even suggest that the election should be postponed. I remember, I think I've probably done a podcast on it because it was definitely this year. He said, look at the Democrats; they're the ones making this story up. But now he appears to have done a 180 on that fact. Yes, Donald Trump has said that there should be this delay. But can he do anything about it? Is there any credence in his argument? And what will eventually happen? That's what I'm going to have a look at today on the podcast. In short, the president himself can do, let me think, nothing to change the date of the election. Elections are organised and the dates for them are set by the United States Congress, and their dates are in federal law. That means that the president can't just change it, as the Prime Minister technically could have before the Fixed Term Parliament Act in the UK. Just change the date willy-nilly depending on when was best for the government or for whatever. No, election dates have to be set through an act of Congress, which would be required to change them. Something that is set in the Constitution, as some dogs go off in the background. Something set in the Constitution is the inauguration date, which is I think it's either the 20th or the 21st of January. And it is always that date because the presidential term is 4 years, no more, no less. Inauguration happens at exactly the same time, on exactly the same date, every 4 years. So even if the election does manage to get pushed back by a congressional law or something like that, it couldn't change the date of the inauguration unless they went to all the trouble of a new constitutional amendment, which I think is a little bit far-fetched just to change the date of the election. Now, why has Trump called for this? Well, it's really around the postal voting and mail-in voting. And he wrote on Twitter, as he always does, with universal mail-in voting, brackets, not absentee voting, which is good, 2020 will be the most inaccurate, capitals, and fraudulent, capitals, election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can can properly, securely, and safely vote. Now, I have done a podcast on the mail-in ballots and that sort of thing. And if you want to know more about my arguments that I'm going to summarise in the next couple of minutes, I recommend you go back and have a look at that. It'll be on my 2020 Vision section of the podcast. I think it's around episode 28 or so. So you can have a look back to find out more of the data, and I think I linked some of it in the descriptions there. But the mail-in voting system, the arguments that Trump is making, ring very hollow, I'm afraid. It is, well, it has been the subject of numerous studies, mail-in voting, by both Democratic and Republican officials in the Department of Justice in both the Bush and Obama administrations. And both times they found what I believe was called a statistically negligible quantity of voter fraud on mail-in ballots, which is the main argument that Trump is raising against the use of this system and why it is going to be the most fraudulent election ever. So yeah, there isn't much of a statistical leg to stand on. Add to that the fact that the president votes by mail, the attorney general votes by mail, the vice president votes by mail. I believe Ivanka Trump votes by mail. And suddenly the arguments against mail-in votes seem to dissipate, because surely if it's good enough for the Attorney General to feel confident that his vote will not be tampered with, the Attorney General, the figurehead and the head of the Department of Justice, if he can vote thinking, yeah, my vote is going to count the way I put my cross in the box or press the button, because America has a slightly different way to voting than we do in the UK. Indeed, sometimes it even varies state by state. But if they feel confident voting by mail, why is it so fraudulent, and why is it so much of a danger to this 2020 election? And essentially what Trump is doing here is he is setting the narrative up for his refusal to accept the election, if that's what happens, if it goes the way of Joe Biden, which would put it in a constitutional quandary. And he is also setting up the groundworks for riling up his base, firstly in the election campaign and potentially after the election result. Again, assuming that the former vice president and current front runner in the polls, although as always take them with a pinch of salt, they didn't exactly get it on the nose last time, but if he wins the election, then Trump will be able to turn around and say, look, I was telling you about all of this all along, they've stolen the election from me. It is a political move. It can't really be clearer than that. Another reason that this particular outburst may have been political is because it came on exactly the same day and pretty much the same time that it was announced the US economy shrank at a rate of 32.9% in the April to June quarter. That is the worst quarterly plunge in the US economy ever, including the 1929 stock market crash and the ensuing Great Depression. The US economy has never shrunk by more than this in a quarter. And, well, let's just say that Donald Trump's election mantra, Donald Trump's campaign strategies, very heavily rely on a strong economy. This US economy is not in a good enough position for Trump to play the economy card successfully in November. So he either has to distract from it and try and go down a different tactic, which seems to be what he is doing, or he has to hope and pray that there is a bounce back, that America recovers very, very quickly, so he can be touting an amazing economic miracle by November. It looks like that economic miracle is not just around the corner, although it is always very hard to read the economic situation, but it doesn't look like they will be on a swift bounce back, given that states are still going into lockdown, still seeing rising case numbers. So he may have to turn elsewhere for his big wins in 2020. because he has to win on something if he's going to win the overall argument. The economy is normally the biggest steer in the way people vote, even if they don't know the precise GDP per capita. They know if they have enough in their bank to spend more. They know if the price of things have gone up. They know if the availability of things have gone up. And all of that revolves around the economy. So whether it's explicit or implicit understanding of how well the country is doing, yes, the economy is normally the biggest steer. So Trump has to find something fast in order to replace it. Now, I mentioned a little while ago about Trump not accepting the result, perhaps. Every losing candidate of the two major parties, since we had these two major parties, or since the Americans had these two major parties, has accepted the result of the election after the election. It just helps. If the loser accepts they've lost, there is no argument that they have lost. Even in the hotly contested 2000 presidential election, once it went to the Supreme Court, Gore dropped his appeal and conceded the election. What Trump did not commit to doing, however, in a recent Fox News interview with Chris Wallace, which I recommend people check out, it's a very good interview, and it was a clanger for the president. It really dropped the ball in that interview. But in that interview, he refused to commit to honouring or respecting the result of the election. And that's a problem. Because, like I said earlier, he has committed followers. He has followers who would follow him to the end of the earth, who would follow him if he pulled out a gun and shot someone on Fifth Avenue. As he said in, I think it was the 2016 election campaign. So, if he doesn't accept the election, he could have what may look like an army behind him. And that poses big questions. In that interview, when asked whether he would accept the results, he said, I have to see. Look, I have to see. I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no. And I didn't last time either. Which is, it's what he said last time. He won last time, so he didn't have to face this argument. He might not win this time. So we don't know. Now, there has been some reaction to the delaying of the election, or the announcement of possibly delaying the election by Trump, although we do know that he has no power in the matter. Democratic representatives, a member of the House of Representatives, Zoe Lofgren, she is the chair of the House Committee overseeing election security, has rejected a delay, saying only Congress can change the date of our elections, and under no circumstance will we consider doing so to accommodate the president's inept and haphazard response to the coronavirus pandemic, or give credence to the lies and misinformation he spreads regarding the manner in which Americans can safely and securely cast their ballots. So that's a pretty unequivocal response. Even Republicans don't like the idea of changing the date of the election. Republican Senator Ted Cruz told journalists we should not delay the election, and Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham, a senator from South Carolina, said, I think delaying the election probably wouldn't be a good idea. So it doesn't look like he will be delaying it.